There's a garden 2 doors down from where I used to live that hasn't been touched by a rototiller in over 5 years. No tilling, no turning, nothing. And every single summer, that garden outproduces every tilled garden on the block. Richer soil. Fewer weeds. Tomatoes that keep going strong in a drought that has everyone else dragging hoses across their yards. For years, I believed tilling was just something you did. Spring came, the tiller came out, that was the routine. I never questioned it. Until I saw what that untouched garden was doing without it. Before we get into what changed my mind, if you're someone who wants gardening advice based on real experience and not just trends, go ahead and subscribe. I'm going to walk you through exactly what I found, and it's going to challenge something almost every home gardener in America still does every spring. I'll be honest, my first thought was that the guy had just gotten lazy. That's what most of the neighbors thought too. His name was Frank Miller, an older gardener who'd been working that same patch of dirt in rural Ohio for almost 30 years. Frank tilled every spring like his father taught him, the same way most of us learned it, because that's just what you do before you plant. Then one spring, his back gave out on him. He couldn't wrestle that tiller across the yard, so he skipped it. He figured the season would be a wash. What surprised me was that it wasn't. That was the year his tomatoes and peppers grew better than they had in a decade. He figured it was a fluke. So the next spring, still cautious, still not fully trusting it, he skipped the tiller again. And the soil kept getting better, not worse. Darker. Looser without being turned. Full of earthworms he swears he hadn't seen in years. That's when I started asking him questions, because none of that matched what I thought I knew about soil. Here's why the old way feels right in the first place. Freshly tilled soil looks like progress. It's dark, it's crumbly, it looks like a clean slate you're handing your plants. There's something satisfying about turning that ground over, like you're doing real work. I understand the appeal completely, because I felt it too. But that fresh, turned-up look was hiding something none of us could see from the surface. What I didn't realize back then is that healthy soil isn't just dirt. It's alive. Underneath the surface, there are billions of microorganisms, fungi, earthworms, and root networks, all working together like a quiet, underground economy. They build tunnels. They trade nutrients back and forth. They hold the soil structure together in a way no machine ever could. Every time a rototiller rips through that ground, it doesn't just loosen the soil, it tears through fungal threads and worm tunnels that took years to build. The soil gets reset back to zero. And that underground world has to start rebuilding itself from scratch, every single season. Here's the part that really got me. A lot of us till partly to fight weeds, myself included. But tilling actually drags buried weed seeds up to the surface, right into the sunlight they need to sprout. So the very tool we use to fight weeds is quietly creating more of them. I made this mistake for years without ever connecting the dots. Once I understood that, I wanted to know what Frank was doing instead, if not tilling. It turns out traditional farming communities, both here in the US and across parts of Europe, had already worked this out generations ago, long before anyone had the science to explain why it worked. The first method Frank leaned on was a permanent mulch layer. A steady covering of straw or shredded leaves sitting right on top of the soil, never worked in, just resting there. It holds moisture in through the hottest part of summer and slowly breaks down, feeding the ground the same way a forest floor feeds itself, one quiet layer at a time. The second method was surface composting. Instead of digging compost down into the bed, he simply laid it on top and let it work its way in naturally, the way rain and worms and time do that job better than a shovel ever could. The third method surprised me the most, because it still involves a tool. Frank uses something called a broad fork to loosen compacted ground when it truly needs it. But he doesn't flip the soil over with it. He just lifts and cracks the ground, breaking it up without inverting those layers, so all that underground life stays exactly where it built itself. Here's the biggest realization Frank shared with me, the one that changed how I look at my whole garden now. He said the most overlooked technique isn't a technique at all. It's restraint. It's leaving the ground alone long enough for it to finish what it's already doing. We're taught that more effort means a better harvest, more digging, more turning, more control. But his soil didn't thrive because he did more. It thrived the year he was physically forced to do less. Now, have you ever noticed your own soil feeling harder to work the more you tilled it, season after season, instead of easier? If that sounds familiar, you're not imagining it, and you're definitely not doing anything wrong. Most of us learn to garden this way. Our parents did it, their parents did it, and it was the only method anyone showed us. There's no blame here. It's just worth questioning now that we know more. I do want to be fair, because tilling isn't the enemy in every situation. Breaking brand new ground for the first time is still one of the few times tilling genuinely earns its place. It can also help work certain amendments in quickly under specific starting conditions. The real issue was never tilling itself. It was doing it out of habit, every single year, without asking whether the soil actually needed it. As for honest expectations, this isn't an overnight fix. Frank's soil took a full season before he noticed a real difference, and a couple more years before it truly transformed. If you try this, don't expect a miracle by next weekend. Expect slow, steady improvement, the same kind traditional farmers have always trusted, one season layered on top of another. What I've come to believe now is that a lot of today's regenerative gardening advice isn't some new discovery at all. It's modern science finally catching up to what traditional farmers already knew from decades of quiet observation. Frank's accident wasn't luck. It was his soil finally being left alone long enough to do the job it already knew how to do. The healthiest gardens usually aren't the ones worked the hardest. They're the ones disturbed the least. That's the whole shift, right there. Less interruption, not more effort. If any of this changed how you think about your own garden, try it on just one small section this season. Leave it untilled, mulch it, and just watch what happens over the next few months. You might be surprised by what shows up. Before you go, if this kind of practical, experience-based gardening content is useful to you, subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Because this same pattern, doing less instead of more, shows up somewhere else too. The way traditional farmers water their gardens follows this exact same principle, and most of us are doing it in the completely opposite direction. That's a mistake worth understanding before next season starts.